Session 23, Eliminating Stress and Tension.
We've said over and over again that the success personality is the generally optimistic, positive, happy, cheerful, if you like, outgoing personality. And we've also said from the very beginning that much of what you are today is learned. That most of your habits, your values, your attitudes, your expectations, your behaviors, your personality, qualities, and attributes have been learned by a process of input, repetition, selective perception, over and over again until you become the person that you are. We've also said that everything that you have today in your life, tangible and intangible, you have attracted to yourself because of the person you are. You can attract more because you can change the person that you are. In the last session we talked about negative emotions being the major obstacle that stands between you and happiness, health, joy, and fulfillment in life. And in this session I want to talk to you about the conditions that predispose you and me to be negative. We know that stress and tension and negative emotions are subject to the law of cause and effect. In other words, for every effect in our life, there's a specific cause. If you have tension, if you have stress, if you have negative emotions, just like if you have any physical ailment, there's a specific cause and we can trace it back. And in this session, I'm going to show you how to become your own psychotherapist. I'm going to give you 6 keys to self-awareness, self-understanding, self-development, so that whenever you feel unhappy or stressed or fearful or anxious or anything other than joyous and positive and happy, whenever you feel that way, you will be able to go through these 6 and do an evaluation of yourself and be your own psychotherapist. And in 95 to 99% of cases, you'll be able to identify exactly what it is that's troubling you and remove it. So let's go to the board. As I say, in my estimation, after years and years and thousands of hours, I think there's 6 primary conditions that cause us to feel stressed and tense and predispose us to negative emotions. Remember, negative emotions are merely the outward expression of an inward condition. If we can correct the inward condition, we can correct the outward expression. So number 1, starting point of negativity in my estimation, top of the list, head of the hit parade, is a lack of meaning and purpose in life. A lack of meaning and purpose. In fact, in every study that I've looked at, we find that human beings, in order to be happy, need significance. They need to feel that their life has meaning. They need to feel that there's a reason for being alive. They need to feel that they're going in a particular direction. So a lack of meaning and purpose leads to a lack of direction. And I said earlier that one of the most profound observations of the human condition is that we are all goal-seeking organisms, that we are only happy when we're moving progressively toward the direction of something that's important. Earl Nightingale said that happiness is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal or goal. So as soon as we don't have a worthy ideal or goal, we start to drift, we start to go in circles, and we start to become unhappy. So lack of meaning and purpose means a lack of goals. We've talked throughout this session how important it is that you have goals, how important it is that you write them down, how important it is that you think about them, how important it is that you work on them every day, because it is goals that give meaning, purpose, direction, power, enthusiasm, and drive to your life. Now, if you want a very simple test, all you have to do is look at the times of your life when you felt the very best, now or some other time, and you'll find invariably you were working progressively towards something that was important for you. You also can test this by looking at people around you who are not happy. And a good friend of mine has a very simple test. Whenever somebody comes to him and they're unhappy for any reason at all, he says to them, he says, what are your goals in life? Where do you want to be in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years? And you know what he finds? He finds in 80-90% of cases, people who are unhappy have no goals. And the flip side is also true. In 80-90% of cases, people who are happy are people with clear, specific goals. So we've talked a lot about this, setting goals, writing them down, making plans for their accomplishment, and working progressively toward the accomplishment of even a small goal will straighten you out, will lift you up, will make you positive and enthusiastic faster than anything else that you can do. In fact, what Viktor Frankl found in his work in logotherapy is that if you have a meaning, if you have a reason, you will live sometimes 10, 20, 30 years longer than people who don't. The average life expectancy, by the way, of people in America who retire without goals is 14 months. Interesting, 14 months. And people who retire with goals can live 25 or 30 years. Number two, second reason or condition that predisposes us to tension and stress is what is called the incomplete action. The incomplete action is when we engage in an action or a behavior that is not finished. It's just partially finished. When we start a job and don't finish it. When we start a task, or we start to write out our goals and we leave it. There is within the human psyche what is called an urge to completion. This urge to completion makes us very uncomfortable when we have work left undone. In fact, this incomplete action really works well in our behalf, especially if we have set priorities and what we're working on is important and contributes something. Big problem occurs, by the way, is if we don't set priorities, if we don't have our goals clearly organized and we don't set priorities, we can be doing things that are not important to us, but we can still feel stressed out because we're leaving them hanging. We can still feel stressed out because we are procrastinating. And as you know, procrastination is not only a thief of time and life, procrastination is a major source of stress. We put off a task and we put off a task and we become more and more stressed because this urge to completion drives us, and yet this urge to procrastinate holds us back. Every single completed act is a source of self-esteem and motivation. Every single time you complete an action of any kind, whether it's washing the dishes and cleaning up the sink, mowing the lawn, putting together a major proposal, getting a degree, getting married, or starting and building a successful business, every single time you complete an action, your self-esteem goes up because you feel like a winner. You feel like a winner every single time you do something that has a beginning and an end. It's called the feeling of earned success, the feeling of achievement. It makes us feel terrific. Now, every single time you engage in an act that you don't finish, it's like running in a race where you don't finish, and you feel like a loser. So the rule is this: do it now, do it now, do it now. Get on with it, get working, get busy, complete these actions. This brings us to a special case of the incomplete action, which psychologists call unfinished business. Unfinished business is a major source of stress for you and for I. And it happens all the time. Unfinished business occurs when you get into a relationship with another person or persons, and the relationship ends, sometimes unpleasantly, but it's still dragging on. Now, the two most common examples of unfinished business are romantic relationships that end, but they're not over yet, and business relationships where you lose a job, or you're fired from a job, or you quit a job, but you have not let go of it. With regard to the first, romantic relationships, there are three keys to dealing with the end of a romantic relationship when it's over. Number one is to remember this, is that nobody can ever have any effect on your emotions unless there is still something that you want from them. In other words, if you don't want anything from someone else, if you don't want their love, their respect, their money, or something else, they can't have any control over you. As soon as you don't want anything from someone else, the emotional component is torn and you're free of them. The way that you deal with a finished marriage or a finished relationship is very simple. I'll just throw this in quickly. 3 steps. Number one, it's called writing the letter. And thousands of people have taken this advice, and now they teach this in courses all over the country. You write a letter to that person. In a letter you write 3 things. Number one is you write, I accept 100% responsibility for our relationship and for everything that happened in it. You are responsible. As an adult, you take responsibility. You got into the relationship, you stayed in the relationship or the job or whatever else it happened to be, but let's limit this to a relationship now. Number 2 is you forgive the other person 100% for everything they ever did that hurt you. I forgive you for everything you ever did or said that hurt me. And number 3, you wish them well. Wish him or her well. And then mail the letter. Mail the letter with the right address and the right postage, and the instant that you mail the letter, your life will change. If you know anybody who's going through a difficult relationship or the breakdown of a relationship, put them through this simple exercise, have them mail the letter, and the instant the letter drops in the postbox, your life will change. It'd be like an enormous burden is lifted off your shoulders. I had a very good friend, a woman who was fired from a job with a large financial institution, and she was going to sue that company, and she was going to sue them for 18 months as severance, and she was going to get them, and so on and so forth. And I asked her, I said, she was really angry, I said, what are your chances of winning? She said, well, maybe 50, 60%. I said, how long will it take? She said, at least 18 months, maybe 2 years. I said, what kind of a mental state are you going to be in for that period of time? I said, can you get another job? She said, no, I couldn't get another job because that would weaken my case in court. I said, why don't you just let it go and walk away from it and get on with something else? Because it's just not worth it. And you know, she took my advice, and within 3 months she had a better job at a better salary with a better position. She wrote me a card. She said it was the best advice she ever had. So if you're in a situation of unfinished business, or you find yourself in one, the solution is finish it, get rid of it, have done with it. Okay? Number 3 reason what causes, or the third condition that causes you and I an enormous amount of stress is fear of failure. Our old friend, fear of failure. Fear of failure, which as we know is a conditioned response, goes back to childhood, goes back to our parents saying, no, don't, stop, get away from there, punishing us for trying new things and different things. It reemerges in adult life as this fear of trying, this fear of attempting something new, this deep down feeling that settles in the pit of the stomach whenever we contemplate a major change. Fear of failure can be dealt with in 2 simple ways. Number 1 is the beautiful quote from Mark Twain. It says, do the thing you fear, and the death of fear is certain. Do the thing you fear, and the death of fear is certain. This is what is called systematic desensitization. If you're afraid of cold calling, just get out and do it until you don't think about it anymore. If you are afraid of speaking publicly in front of an audience, or selling, or doing anything, just get out and do the thing you fear over and over again until finally you reach the point where it doesn't disturb you at all. Thousands, even millions of men and women who've been terrified of public speaking have been able to force themselves to get up in front of small groups and then larger and larger groups, and eventually reach the point where they're unafraid to do the thing they fear, and what paralyzed them at one time doesn't bother them at all anymore. So do the thing you fear. Confront the fear. Face the fear. Deal with the fear. Remember that the fear is only a negative mental habit pattern that you can eliminate by facing it and doing it over and over again until it's gone. Now, the second thing that you can do, very, very simple affirmation that you can use to eliminate the fear of failure, is this. Is repeat whenever you think of the fear situation, whenever you feel the physical manifestation, the anxiety, the stress, the quickening heart rate, whenever you think of the fearful situation, say over and over to yourself very strongly, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it. And whenever you see someone else who is going through fear and uneasiness, someone in your family, one of your friends, tell them that too. Say that you can do it, you can do it. You can do it. Every single one of us has been encouraged to do something that has been momentous in our lives because someone else believed that we could. So say, I can do it, and then encourage everybody you know who has a goal. And say to them, you can do it. I can do it, you can do it. But whenever you feel this tension, you'll find a remarkable thing. If you say, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it. Or I think I can, I know I can. When you repeat this, you will find that this message, emotionalized, coming from the conscious mind to the subconscious, hits the other message of I can't, coming up, and it drives it down. And the more emotion you put into I can do it, the weaker and weaker becomes the I can't. And eventually, the stronger emotion, remember, law of emotion, the stronger emotion will dominate and overpower the weaker emotion. This brings us to the 4th major cause of stress and tension in our lives. And it's number 4, considered to be perhaps one of the most important or the worst of all fears, the fear of rejection. The fear of rejection starts in early childhood. As you know, an infant comes into the world with no fears at all. And the infant comes in needing an enormous amount of love, touching, approval, and unconditional acceptance from his or her parents. However, parents, in order to direct and control their children, use destructive criticism and conditional love in order to get them to do what they want them to do. Now, a child who grows up with conditional love, as we talked about earlier, a child who grows up with conditional love, that means the parents say, you better or else. If you don't, you're going to get it. Or if the child makes a mistake and drops something, or comes home late, or breaks something, or gets a bad grade, the parents stop loving the child. Now, in their hearts, the parents may not stop loving the child. But the child perceives that the parents have stopped loving him or her because the parents turn cold. The parents punish the child. The parents send them to their bedroom. Whenever I have to discipline one of my children, and the way we discipline our children now is we put them in the corner. Kids hate to stand in the corner. I have kids that are 7 and 5, and Michael is 1, or David is 1. He's too small to stand in the corner. But what I do is I tell them this. I say, I love you very much, but you have to stand in the corner for 10 minutes. Or I love you very much, but you're going to have to go to your bedroom without dessert. But I always tell them that I love them. My love is unconditional, but what they did or their behavior is not acceptable, and then I stand them in the corner. So even when they stand in the corner, they know that I love them. And they'll even say that. They'll say, I know you still love me. Standing in the corner, they'll say that, but I have to stand in the corner anyway. So conditional love leads to fear of rejection. Fear of rejection leads to, as adults, it leads to type A behavior. Now it's interesting, men and women manifest this fear of rejection in different ways. For men, predominantly, we manifest it in type A behavior. Women have a tendency to manifest this fear of rejection, this growing up with conditional love, in 4 forms. One is depression, another is withdrawal, a third is psychosomatic symptoms, headaches and tension, and a fourth is hypersensitivity. Hypersensitivity in that they are very, very concerned about the opinions of other people. They think and they adjust their behaviors and actions always in consideration of what others might think, what others might say. Now, men are similar to that, but men have a tendency to take out this conditional love, this fear of rejection, this lack of being loved in childhood, in type A behavior, which is an aggressive response to life that is extremely unhealthy. And about 60% of men are type A's, and about 10% of women. As more and more women enter into highly competitive occupations, more and more women are becoming type A's too. But right now, it is a major killer. In fact, Dr. Kenneth Cooper says that there is no death from heart disease prior to age 70 in the absence of type A behavior. That most of the work that's being done on heart disease today, unfortunately, where they look at cholesterol and they look at lifestyle and so on, the fact is that without the stress, the tension, and the drive of type A behavior. Type A behavior was an expression that was developed by 2 heart specialists who found that most of their patients had a particular psychological profile. They had a way of acting, walking, and talking that was consistent over every single patient who had heart disease. And we'll talk about the opposite, type B, in just a second. So type A behavior is a killer. As a matter of fact, most people who are true type A's, that's about 10-20% of the male population, true type A's usually die by the age of about 55. In America and Canada today, about 80% of the money in our countries is controlled by women whose husbands burned themselves out and died young earning it. A recent study by Forbes magazine, Dr. Shirley Blotnick of Forbes, suggested that most of these women spend all the money that their husbands earned before they die themselves and pass very little on to their families. Now, it's just very, very interesting that men work all their lives, burn themselves out, kill themselves with early heart attacks. The women spend the money, and at the end of the woman's life, there's nothing left. Something to think about when you think about how important it is to amass fortune. Okay, so some of the characteristics of type A behavior. First characteristic of type A behavior is what is called the hurry sickness. The person who has type A behavior is always in a hurry. They're always going fast. They can't stop. They're very, very impatient. They've got to get things done. They can't slow down. They don't feel like relaxing. They have this hurry sickness, and they're continually on the go, on the go, on the go. Number 2 is they have what is called insecurity of status. Insecurity of status because of, again, going back to childhood, insecurity of status means that no matter how much they accomplish, they never relax. No matter how many promotions they get or how much money they make, they never think that they're good enough. They never have this feeling of unconditional love, so they're continually striving for it. By the way, where does unconditional love come from? Almost invariably from the father. The father is the predominant figure, and most of us, for one reason or another, had fathers that didn't give us the quality and quantity of unconditional love we desired. And very often we find ourselves striving in life, even after our parents have died, we're striving somehow to earn their approval by succeeding, or succeeding more, or succeeding more. It's also another example of type A behavior is continually striving for performance. We're very performance oriented, but it's performance to some undetermined high standard. And this is the key, to some undetermined high standard. What does that mean? It means that no matter how well we do, we're never satisfied because the standard is undetermined. We've not said that if we achieve a certain standard, we'll be satisfied. What we do is we continue to try to perform, and every single time we achieve any kind of a goal, we raise the bar. And then we raise the bar higher. We keep raising the bar, and we keep raising the bar, and we keep running. It's like having your quota expanded or increased every single time you hit a goal, so the quota keeps growing and growing and growing. A fourth characteristic of type A behavior is competitiveness. Competitiveness which is generalized toward almost everybody. Interestingly, let me go over here while they clean the board. With regard to competitiveness, you'll find that there is what is known as lack of discrimination in competitiveness. A person who is a type A behavior, who is a type A, competes against everybody for everything. They don't have the ability to set priorities, to say, now, this is a key area for me to excel in, but this is not particularly important. They compete for parking spaces. They compete for on the freeways. They compete for a place in the elevator. They compete for a place in the restaurant. They compete to work with a large customer. They compete to work on a small job. They have the inability to discriminate between what is an important area to do well in relative to others and what is an unimportant area to do well in relative to others. So be alert to this competitiveness where we're always comparing ourselves favorably or unfavorably with other people. In Desiderata, it said, neither compare thyself with others, for you will always find others who are better than you, and that you will feel inferior, and others who are worse than you, and you'll feel superior. The type A is always comparing themselves with other people, and especially he or she compares themselves with people on their own level. They have a tendency, unfortunately, to step on the people below them. They have a tendency, unfortunately, to be preoccupied with their bosses and the opinion of their bosses, because the type A's boss takes on the role of the parent. As they go from childhood to adulthood, as they go from the family to the workplace, they go from trying to earn the approval of the parent to trying to earn the approval of the boss. And they become preoccupied with the boss's opinion. So number 5 is aggression. The type A is aggressive. And in conjunction with that, hostility. The type A is angry. The type A is angry because it goes back again to infancy, to childhood, where the type A just never got the love that he or she required and was angry as a child and is now angry as an adult. A sixth characteristic of type A is that the type A is thing-oriented versus people-oriented. Is thing-oriented, especially in terms of numbers. The type A is concerned with money, cars, home, status, publications, sales, production figures, earnings, and so on. Not particularly person-oriented. As a matter of fact, as far as the type A is concerned, there are 3 types of people. There are people who can help him or her, and those are the people which he is very, very careful with. There are people who cannot help him or her. Those people he will step on, be rude to, be snobbish with. And then there are the people who are neutral, and those people he just ignores. Now, interesting, there's one other category. There's people who can be threats or who are competitive threats to him. Those are people that he or she will use Machiavellian diabolical tactics to try to undermine and to hurt. This goes back into all the work in management that we see, Machiavellian management. And number 7, the type A takes no time off. See, the type A feels that he or she is on a treadmill, and that if he or she slows down, especially someone's going to catch him. So even on the weekends they work. Even on holidays they work. Even when they travel on an airplane, they're always working. They never stop working because they're afraid somebody might be gaining on them. Well, what happens to type A's? According to our research, we find that 2 things. Is that type A's tend to die young. We said that before. They tend to be unhappy. They tend to feel that they are in a rat race. They tend to feel that they are being driven by external circumstances. And this is the type A's career path. This is time, and this is money. This is the amount of money, position, power, prestige they earn. This is the amount of time. The type A's career path tends to be like this. They rise very rapidly at the beginning of their careers, and they are used. And there are some companies that test for and hire only type A's, but at a certain point they start to burn out. They start to flatten out, and they flatten out for a reason. It's because the people up above who know what's going on don't want them any higher in the company, and the people down below whom they stepped on will not help them or support them. Now, the type B is different. The type B's career path is more like this. This is the B, this is the A. The type B's career path has a slower rise, but it's steady and continuous. And here's the key. The type B focuses on performance. And performance is the key to success in the world of work. The type A focuses on politics. And politics only works until the political structure changes, and it always does. Well, if you recognize yourself as a type A, how do you stop being a type A and start move toward being a type B, a more relaxed, high performance, more creative, more people-oriented person? Well, it's very simple. Step number one is admit that you're a type A. Admit it. Most people won't admit that they're type A's. Well, once you admit that you're a type A, number two, and some people say, I'm a type A, I'll be dead before I'm 55. Once you admit it, decide to change. Make the decision to change. And once you've made the decision to change, play the taped affirmation that we provide for you. Taped affirmation twice daily. If you play the taped affirmation twice per day, you will stop being a type A behavior, or a type A person. You'll go from being a type A to being a type B. Now, one final point is somebody says, what's the difference between type A and workaholic? So-and-so is a workaholic, so-and-so is a type A. Very, very simple. The workaholic is very different from type A. It's almost like there's a competition here. And how do you tell? On the outside, they seem to work with the same amount of intensity. But the difference is simply this. The workaholic is inner-directed, is directed toward goals, and is self-determined. The type A is externally driven and feels that their agenda is set by people outside themselves. The workaholic can take time off. This is the test. The workaholic can take time off. The type A cannot take time off. If you ask a workaholic, what's the most important thing in your life, the workaholic will almost invariably say, my family, my personal relationships. If you ask the type A, they'll say, my work, my career, my business. That's how you tell the difference between the two. And again, the key behavior, and you can only judge by behaviors, is the ability to take time off and spend time on family, health, friendships, travel, and so on. Okay, this brings us to the fifth major condition that predisposes us to stress, tension, negative emotions, psychosomatic illness, and early death. And it's number 5, and it's denial. Denial means denial of reality. It's interesting, Peter Uspensky talked about this in one of his books many years ago. He said that the human organism is a lying organism, and in that we have a tendency to delude ourselves or to lie to ourselves, and one of the ways that we do it is through denial of reality. We refuse to face reality. We pretend that life is not the way it is. Especially, we refuse to face unpleasant truths. And this is worth writing. The refusal to face unpleasant truths. Now, some of the most unpleasant truths of our lives have to do with our talents and abilities, our personalities, our relationships, and our work. Is that a person who's doing poorly in their work and who doesn't like their work will often deny it and pretend that it's not true. And the key to overcoming denial, and by the way, most psychologists believe that denial of reality is the number one cause of mental illness. Of course, it's tied into all of the others that we've talked about so far. The key to dealing with denial is very simply this, is to understand where it comes from. We engage in denial because we are afraid of embarrassment. All cases of denial involve embarrassment, anticipated embarrassment of some kind. They involve what the Asians call loss of face. All occasions of denial require that we face the truth in our lives. So here are the keys to using and to understanding denial. Number 1, remember this. Key to the philosophy of objectivism. Reality is. Reality is. What that means is that whatever the situation in your life is, it is. It's a fact. It's a truth. And the facing of it, and the sooner you face it, the better off you'll be and the happier you'll be. Number 2 is that there is always a price you can pay to be free from any stress or tension. There is always a price you can pay. There is always a price. If you're unhappy for any reason, there's always a price you can pay. And so you have to ask yourself, what is the price? And number 3 is resolve to pay the price. Resolve to pay the price. Sooner rather than later. Because no matter what, you're going to have to pay it eventually, rather than later. Now here are the 2 questions that you can use to unlock the key to denial. Unlock the door of denial. And this is it. Whenever you feel tense or unhappy or stressed, or you start to get colds or flus or sniffles, or you start to feel unhappy, or you don't sleep well at night, or you start to find yourself irritable or distracted or unhappy for any reason at all, assume that there's something in your life that you're not dealing with. Assume that denial is taking place, that there's something that is making you uncomfortable and you are putting off dealing with it. It is the resistance, it's the not dealing with it that causes the stress. So this is what you do. You simply say, what is it in my life that I'm not facing? What is it in your life that you're not facing right now that's causing some stress or some disharmony? What is it in my life that I'm not facing? And then don't delude yourself by saying, well, maybe it's because my car's parked in the parking meter when there's no money in it, or maybe it's because I didn't have lunch. Don't delude yourself. Immediately ask yourself, what's the worst it could possibly be? What is the worst it could possibly be? If you're married, often the worst it could possibly be is that something is wrong with your marriage. If you have children, sometimes the worst it could possibly be is that you're concerned that your children are turning out wrong. If you're in a job, the worst it could possibly be may be that this is the wrong job for you, but you're afraid to leave it. Maybe for men this is a terrible thing, but the worst it could possibly be is that you're not very good at your chosen career. A man who feels that he's not very good at his work has a terrible amount of stress going on inside. Maybe you've taken a degree. I had a good friend who took a medical degree, 8 years, qualified as a doctor, found he hated medicine, didn't want to go through for medicine. His father had paid his way. His father was a doctor. He planned to be a doctor all his life. He's now 26 years old, and he didn't like the practice of medicine. He went through tremendous stress before he accepted that. So the key is, say, what is it in my life that I'm not facing, and then resolve to face it. Now, in psychology, there's 2 basic personalities. There's what is called the evader personality. The evader personality is the personality that doesn't like to face reality, that's always hoping that reality will go away, or something will turn up, or something will change. And there is the confronter. Now, we're taught as children not to be confronters, but the fact is that the confronter personality is far healthier than the evader. In a test that they did at one of the leading universities, they took 2 groups of students and they identified them as evaders and confronters and put them into an experiment where they were tied up, attached to an electrode by their fingers, and every 60 seconds they got a shock, a mild shock on the finger. And they watched them through a one-way mirror, and they found that the evaders would sit there while the clock was going tick, 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 but they would never look at the clock. They would talk, they would make jokes, they would distract themselves, but they'd never look at the clock. And at the end of the experiment, their blood pressure, measured from beginning to end, was up over 30%. Very high stress. The confronters, on the other hand, were very different. The confronters would do the same thing. They talk to each other, they keep their fingers in the electrode, but as the clock came up to 12 and the shock came, they would all be watching the clock, and they would watch the clock and take the shock and then go on back with their conversation, keeping their eye on the clock all the time. At the end of this experiment, their blood pressure was the same. The key to mental health is to be a confronter, not an evader. Ask, what is the worst it could possibly be? What is it in my life that I'm not facing? And then whatever it is, resolve to face it, resolve to pay the price. Never trade your peace of mind for anything. The most important rule that you can learn in life is set peace of mind as your highest goal. And if something is robbing you of your peace of mind, then the highest responsibility you have to yourself is to confront and deal with the situation and make it into it. The 6th major cause or condition that causes us stress, tension, and negative emotion is anger. We've talked about anger, and we know that anger depends for its very genesis on the phenomena of blaming. Now, why do we become angry? Well, we become angry when we perceive, and this is the key, when we have a perception of being aggressed upon, when we have a perception that our expectations are being frustrated, when we have a perception of fear or pain, when we have a perception or when we interpret our world when we look at our world and we say that there is something out there that is making us a victim. You see, in order for us to get angry, we must perceive ourselves as a victim. Whenever we perceive ourselves as a victim, there's a powerful urge inside of us to attack or to counterattack. In health, we call this the fight or flight response. Whenever we are threatened, just like an animal, this primordial response of fight or flight is triggered and we want to do something. However, in our society, it's usually not possible. Retaliation is usually not possible. Retaliation is not possible because it's not acceptable. The person that we want to retaliate is bigger than us or is gone. Or it's not advisable because the person who causes us the problem is our boss, our mother-in-law, or something else. So if we do not get this anger out of our system, if we don't get it out, it builds up inside the system and it poisons the system. So Dr. Hans Selye came up with what he called gross physical impact activity. He found that any kind of contact dispelled anger. So he found that if you could engage in any kind of activity that involved contact, you could get the anger out of your system. He found with your hands you could hit things. He found with your feet you could kick things. He found that the third method of contact was voice. You could scream. And screaming is a way of getting anger out of our system. And finally, he found that with your teeth, you could bite. And when you think of a particularly violent fight, you think of a fight where people hit, kick, scream, and bite, where people's anger is expressed in hitting, kicking, screaming, and biting. Of course, the key to dealing with everything that we've talked about, all six, but especially anger, is what we call the cognitive control method. And as we come to the end of this session, here are the keys to managing health and stress. Remember that stress is positive, that stress that is goal-directed gives energy, gives vitality, makes us feel terrific. But stress that is directed, that is externally oriented, that is a result of being pressured and driven to do something, is negative, it robs us of energy, and it makes us sick. It's the difference between an internal locus of control, goal-oriented, and an external locus of control, external pressures. Cognitive control means I am responsible. It means that nobody can make you feel anything without your permission. That as long as you accept complete responsibility and you use your mind to stay on top of your life, that you can control the way that you think and feel. Also, the law of substitution. The law of substitution says that you cannot think and feel stressed if you keep your mind on something positive. Now, what do you keep your mind on to stay positive? This is the key. Think about your goals all the time. Think about your goals all the time. You see, your goals, once you've written them out, once you've decided what it is you want and made a plan to accomplish them, when you think about your goals all the time, it becomes a habit. When we talk about habit, when we look at anger, anger is also a habit. Do you know that when you give in to anger, it is a mark of weakness, a mark of childishness, a mark of immaturity, a mark of insincerity, but it is also a conditioned response that every single time that you allow yourself to become angry, you lower your resistance to anger. Every single time that you stop yourself from becoming angry by accepting responsibility, refusing to blame, taking control of your emotional life, you increase your resistance to anger until it gets to the point where sticks and stones can break your bones, but words will never hurt you. In summary, the keys to maintaining a high quality of inner peace in life. Number one condition that robs us of inner peace is the lack of goals. Set clear, specific goals and work on them every day. Think about them all the time. Number two is incomplete action. Finish your tasks. Carry them through to completion. Overcome procrastination. Number three is the fear of failure. Confront your fears. Do the thing you fear, and the death of fear is certain. Number four is the fear of rejection. The way they overcome the fear of rejection is by moving toward becoming a type B personality. Play the tape. Place greater emphasis on your relationships. Be more relaxed. Live a more balanced life. And realize that this type A behavior, this obsessive compulsive behavior, comes from childhood experiences that are past now. Number four is overcome denial by being willing to face reality and accept that whatever it is, it is. Remember, there's always a price you can pay to be free of something that disturbs you, and you always know what the price is. Ask yourself, what is it that I'm not facing? And then resolve to face it. And finally, anger. Anger comes from trying to blame someone else, trying to find someone or something external to ourselves that is responsible for our own unhappiness. The key to dealing with anger is to accept total responsibility, find ways not to express negative emotions, think continually about your goals, and get so busy working on something that's important to you that you don't have time for any negativity at all. And finally, remember this, is that stress is positive as long as it is goal-oriented. And if you develop lots and lots of goal-oriented stress, you will accomplish great things, have lots of health and energy, have low levels of physical ailments, and probably live to be 100.